Alright, welcome to another Unity tutorial video. I haven't done one of these in like a year or more. Um, there's been a lot of changes to Unity and a lot of updates, so your scripts probably won't work from the previous tutorials. But that's okay because we're going to be doing something different now. So first thing that I'm going to do is open Unity, and I'm going to be holding the Alt button, which will, instead of opening up the project that I loaded up last, it should open up the kind of dialog box to start a new project or create it or open a new project like this. Here we go. And I'm going to say open other because this is a new computer and my awesome project of Doom was in, let's see, where are you? Awesome project of Doom is in my Dropbox. Anyways, that's a pro tip of how you can do it. So, where we last left off, ooh, we get to upgrade, how exciting. So where we last left off, we had created this awesome project of Doom, and we were using JavaScript, which is, or Unity script as they call it, which is basically JavaScript. And that's a really cool language to start with. That's what I started with. But when I worked on my last game, I started to realize the limitations of it, which was it allowed me to be very lazy when it came to thinking about how much memory I was allocating all these things. Now, too, you're probably thinking, I have no idea what that even means, so why should I even be worried about it? But the fact of the matter is when I started to take into consideration, it actually helped me to structure my thoughts better and to actually solve my programming problems better, which was great. Oh geez, here we go. And one of the languages that really helped me to do this was CSharp. So I made this switch over from JavaScript to CSharp. And I'm now gonna, it's really easy to do once you can wrap your head around some of the kind of quirkiness of it. But it's the language that Unity is going to be embracing going forward. It's the same language that XNA uses, so for games like Monaco. And also, it is very similar to Java, which is the language Notch used to make Minecraft. So if you're excited about that and that you want to get started with that, then we're going to try to do that here. So this is going to be fun. If you want to stick with JavaScript, however, and you like that, you'll still learn some stuff as we move forward about how to use Unity. But I recommend that you try to just try to embrace C#, see what you can do. It's a pretty cool language, and I think it'll teach you a lot about programming. At least it did so for me. So here we are in our project, and what we're going to do first is we're going to create C# versions of these JavaScript scripts. That might seem crazy. So we're going to have our movement script. You'll see here it says C# instead of JS. That's how you know. And we can do our, actually we'll leave a kill object as is for now, because these things can actually interact. But anyways, let's open up our movement script, the JavaScript version, I mean. And then what we're going to do is we're going to also open up the C# version of it. I'm going to copy it over, and we're going to kind of fix it and update it to make it work with C#. And you'll see how easy that is to do. Now you'll see I have this different coloring, and that might be confusing to people. So what I'm going to do, it's a feature in MonoDevelop. So I'm going to go to, oh, how did I do this last time? Options? Yeah, here we go. General, no. Syntax highlighting. Default. Okay. There, that should look more normal. So here is our movement script.js that we've been working on. Now let's open up our movement script C# script, and you should immediately see the differences here. So this and this. You'll see in the C# script you have this using Unity engine, blah blah blah, using system.collections. You'll see that the whole script itself is actually in something called a class. Hey, my friend's using Steam. I will cancel that. Whatever. Anyways, so yeah, you'll see it's a class and it says public, and you know what that means, and what is the mono behavior, blah, blah, blah. And there's all these other things in here, and scary. But the way we can look at this is this part in here is actually the same thing as all of this stuff here. But in Unity, for our JavaScript, it basically removes this part and this last bracket to make it simpler looking. So you're just focusing on the code. But with C#, you want to be able to see this kind of stuff, so then you can do other things like using system.collections.generic, which allows you to have different functionality, like using things called lists and whatnot. And we'll get into that later. But essentially, by exposing this stuff, by bringing it out and making it visible, although it looks more complex and confusing, it actually allows you to do cooler, more specific things later on. And you actually have that power now. So that's very cool. But let's copy this over. So Command A, I should say, copy. And we're going to select all the stuff in these brackets here, in this class called movement script. We're going to delete it. And then we're going to do Command V and paste it. And now you'll see that you get a bunch of these red squiggly lines, and that means you're a terrible person. Now, something to note here, movement script. If this name right here of the name of the script was different than this, it would be an error, because essentially what we're doing in both the JavaScript and the C# version is we're creating a class called movement script that has different functionality and variables. And we'll get into that later a little bit, but essentially, like the way this function is called update, this function is called movement script. And so you can access certain features about update or on collision enter or whatever, the same way you can access certain features of our movement script. Anyways, let's close the JavaScript. Now you'll see we have these var move speed as a float, and that's not working for C#. And the reason that is in JavaScript you have these things that are called variables, and it's basically like this kind of generic container for any kind of information you want to put in there. And that's why we have to specify what we're talking about with it here, right? We have to say this is a variable, its name is move speed, and it is a float. But with C#, you don't have generic like variables. What you do is you would replace this with float, and then you remove that. So you're basically saying move speed is a float. Pretty specific. I'm creating a variable, I'm creating a float variable, but it's called move speed. I don't need to write var anymore. So that's kind of cool. So boom, delete that. Don't know why this completion thing gets so crazy. And same thing here. Transform. That's what we're talking about. This, I think, was a float as well. Boom, boom, boom. Transform here too. So essentially, instead of creating a variable, we're just creating a variable of a specific type. Less typing on our end, and it makes it in the end a little bit more clean. Now for Boolean, which is how we wrote it in JavaScript, it's actually bool now. Even less typing. How wonderful and convenient is that? So now we're basically the same thing we were saying in the JavaScript version. We're just not writing it the same way. These are the same things though in the end. Don't know why that is doing that. I think that's there we go. Now the next thing that's different about C# is that instead of functions, like saying function update, we define something by what it does, and functions return a value or something. So you could say, like, I have an integer called plus, and it will take, you know, number 1 and an integer called number 2, and what it would do is say number 1 plus number 2 and then we basically go like this. We'd say return number 1 plus number 2. This is a terribly stupid example, but if you had that, you have this function that returns an integer value. So what you could say was, like, if I wanted to add some numbers together, I could say integer my integer equals plus 5, 6. And then what's that's going to do is it's going to add 5 and 6 and set my integer equal to that. Now, that might sound confusing, but the cool part about it is, watch. It prompts me with what I need for my little function that I just made. So if I ever forget what plus does, it'll tell me. It needs an integer and then another integer. So boom and boom. Now, the way we were doing this in the past is actually by exposing a variable up here, like color or whatever, and then we go down here and we say like jump enabled. We just set that equal to true. So we don't actually have to return a value here, right? Because this value is already stored in a variable. So we don't have to have this be called like an integer or a boolean. We could, but we don't need to, because we're talking about stuff that already exists is up here. So instead of a function, it returns nothing. And what we say is we say it returns void. So this is a void. So basically replace function with void and you'll have the same exact functionality as you would in JavaScript. And it's as easy as that. Again, my color is weird, but so if you've changed your variables to act like that and you've changed your functions to say void instead, your code should work fairly similar. Oh, here we go. Got another var down here. Color. Awesome color of doom. That's okay. And we know about parameters, right? Because we talked about that before. But you'll see here how we handle it. It's a little different. Instead of saying name of the parameter, this little symbol, and the type that it is, we actually take the type and we put it here, and then we delete it here. So change color, color, new color. There's no little you know, not parentheses, colons needed. There's none of that needed. You don't need to say var. It's very simple. And let's see if this works. So let's save it. Let's go back to our guy and go to our scene. Get our player here. I'm going to remove this script. Actually, I wonder if I can... Actually, I probably can just swap it out right here. Click the CSharp, drag it over, and now, boom, it replaced it. Oh, so here's another thing. So when I had the JavaScript version on, all these things were exposed, right? You could see them in the editor. But for CSharp, if I open it up, I have to specifically tell it these are public, because it defaults to private, which is the opposite of what JavaScript does. Now you might think that's annoying, but a private variable is actually less expensive. Whoa, I don't know what that is. Less expensive for the computer to process, less difficult for it to process than a private variable. So CSharp's actually doing the right thing, the more responsible thing, by making them all private. But if we want to alter them in the Unity editor, we don't care about that. Jump force does not exist in the current context. Jump force. Oh, I must have deleted jump force. Oops. public float jump force. Sorry. Yay, and now they're all here. Move speed is 55, turn speed is 55, and jump speed is 55. And then we would, well, then we would drag on the bullet, and I guess the muzzle's in here, right? Muzzle, and the sound is a gong sound, I think. And now let's see if it works. Oh, let's apply it. We applied it to our prefab now. Hey! Whoa. So it still works. Oh! Forgot how to change color. There we go. Now let's do the kill object script. So let's create a C# script. Apparently we're going to create it there. Get here. Now it's defaulted because I clicked out to new behavior script, but we're going to rename it kill object. We're going to open up the JavaScript version, open up the C# version, and now we can close movement script. But you see here, because I clicked out of it and it named it new behavior script, the class says new behavior script. So we got to change that to kill object. And then now we should be okay. Now over here we have this pragma strict, which essentially was supposed to teach people how to write and type more thoughtfully. But this is what C# does naturally, so we actually don't need that part. But we're going to copy all this over and paste it into here, between these brackets. And you know what we have to do here? Yep, we got to change this to float and delete that part. And then change this to a void. Yep, that's what I want. Okay, and change that to a void. And what else? Let's see if we get any errors here. So let's save this and go back. Uh-oh. Best overloaded method match for blah 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 blah. So what this means is that the thing you need doesn't have enough parameters. So what it expects is a game object and a float number. And what I have is a game object and a float. But this cues us into the next weird thing about C#. If you have a float value in the code, like 0.0 or 1.0, you have to put an F behind it. I know, it's weird, but that's the F stands for float. You could do it another way. You could have it actually like float like that, and that would tell it that this is a float value. This is called casting, by the way, if you ever hear that. You're casting this as a float. Or you can do it the shorthand way that they've so thoughtfully included, which is just to put an F. Now you can do an integer like int my int equals 7, and that's okay because it's an integer. But if you said float my float equals 8.0, you would have a problem. If you put that though, you'd be okay. So let's delete that. We put the F's in, let's save it, and let's see what happens. Static member Unity destroy object cannot be accessed with an instance reference. Qualify it with a type name instead. Okay. So essentially what it's saying is don't use this game object lowercase because it thinks that that is referencing some sort of game object out there, which it is, but it doesn't want that. It wants us to use this capital game object, I think, which is kind of like saying, you know, there's a class out there called game object and it has the ability, a function on it to destroy something, and we're going to call the destroy function of that class kind of like we would call a function of a class called kill object, for example. So let's save that Did I solve the problem? Yay! Now press play. Oh, of course that didn't work because my bullets don't have the new script on it, right? Am I right or am I right? So let's drag the C# script for kill object onto the bullet prefab, and it replaces it up, and our thing went away again. So we gotta go back, make this a public float, save, go back, and now it should appear. Hey, kill timer. Let's make it happen after 5 seconds. Bada bing, bada boom. Press play. Pew. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I said 5. Hey. Whoa. Mother of God. Anyways. Yeah, so that concludes this tutorial video, but thank you all for your awesome comments, wonderfully supportive. I'm glad that you guys are getting use out of this. I want to keep making these. I just haven't had time this past year. It's been kind of crazy, but I want to start doing it more because you guys are awesome. But let me know what you kind of want to learn. So in the comments below, just put, you know, we want to learn about, I don't know, multiplayer or first-person shooters or whatever, and I will try to teach you guys some of the stuff, some of the things you'll need to know how to do in order to make those games come true. Anyways, thanks a lot. Talk to you later.